I inherited the Lakeside cabin from my grandfather just 6 months ago. That rustic wooden sanctuary on the shores of Lake Michigan became my escape from city life and career stress. It was more than property. It was where my childhood memories lived, where I learned to fish, and where I still felt connected to him. When I drove up that Friday for a quiet weekend alone, I never expected to see an unfamiliar moving truck in the gravel driveway. My heart sank as I approached the cabin door and heard voices inside. I stood frozen when I discovered my brother-in-law Jackson directing movers where to place furniture in my home. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had to stand your ground when someone tried to take what rightfully belongs to you. The cabin sits nestled among tall pines on the eastern shore of Lake Michigan, about 3 hours north of Chicago. My grandfather built it himself back in the 60s, with nothing but determination and his own 2 hands. It is not fancy by any means, just a 2-bedroom wooden structure with a large stone fireplace, a small kitchen, and a screened porch facing the water. What makes it special is not its appearance, but the memories created there. Every summer from age 7 until I left for college, I spent 2 weeks at the cabin with my grandfather. He taught me how to bait a hook, clean a fish, build a fire that would last through the night, and paddle a canoe without splashing. But more importantly, he taught me about responsibility, respect for nature, and the value of quiet contemplation. We would sit on the dock at sunset, not saying a word, just watching the orange glow reflect off the water as loons called in the distance. "Rodney," he would say, "most people go through life never truly seeing what is right in front of them. They are too busy looking at their phones or worrying about tomorrow. But here, right now, this sunset belongs to us because we choose to see it." Those words stuck with me through adulthood, through college, through the stress of building my career as an architectural engineer in Chicago. Whenever life became overwhelming, I would close my eyes and imagine sitting on that dock with him. When my grandfather fell ill last year, I took a leave of absence from work to help care for him. His decline was gradual but steady. We had many conversations during those final months, mostly about family history and his hopes for all of us. He never explicitly mentioned the cabin or his will. When he passed peacefully in his sleep at age 84, I was devastated but grateful for our time together. The reading of the will came as a shock to everyone, myself included. While most of his modest savings were divided equally among his 3 children, my father and 2 aunts, he left the Lakeside cabin specifically to me. The lawyer explained that my grandfather had added a personal note to Rodney, who understands the value of silence on the water. The reactions from family members were mixed. My parents seemed genuinely happy for me, knowing how much time I had spent with Grandpa and how much the place meant to me. My aunts were disappointed but understanding. My sister Amanda smiled and congratulated me, though it seemed forced. It was my brother-in-law Jackson who had the most surprising reaction. During the small gathering after the will reading, he cornered me by the drinks table. "So, you got the cabin, huh? Nice score," he said, clapping me on the shoulder a bit too hard. "That place must be worth what 300,000 waterfront property is gold these days." I was taken aback by his immediate focus on the monetary value. I have not really thought about it that way. I just know I want to keep it in the family. "Smart, smart." He nodded, eyes calculating something I could not quite read. "You know, Amanda and I have been talking about getting a vacation place. Maybe we could work something out." That was the first red flag, though I was too grief-stricken to recognize it fully at the time. Amanda had met Jackson during her junior year of college. He was 5 years older, working as a sales representative for a pharmaceutical company full of charm and big dreams. Their courtship was brief, engaged after 4 months, married within a year. I had reservations from the start, sensing something performative about his personality, the way he changed, depending on who was in the room. Their marriage had been rocky from the beginning. Jackson could never seem to stay in one job for long. He was always chasing the next big opportunity, the next venture that would finally make him rich. He tried pharmaceutical sales, real estate multi-level marketing schemes, cryptocurrency trading, each time convinced he had found his calling, each time abandoning it when success did not come quickly enough. Through it all, Amanda stood by him, making excuses for his failures and supporting them with her steady job as a high school English teacher. I could see the strain it put on her, the way her smile became less frequent, her voice more controlled when speaking about their future. When they announced Amanda was pregnant 3 months ago, I noticed how Jackson's demeanor changed. He became more agitated about money, more focused on securing their future, as he called it. I was happy about becoming an uncle, but worried about the increasing pressure I could see in Amanda's eyes. The warning signs continued to pile up in the months following the funeral. At a family Sunday dinner, Jackson casually asked if I had considered getting the cabin appraised. "You should know what you are sitting on," he insisted. "Property taxes can be brutal if you are not careful." Another time he suggested that family should share the wealth when my mother mentioned I had spent a weekend at the cabin. "That place is big enough for all of us to enjoy," he said, looking pointedly at me, "especially now with a baby on the way. Would be a perfect place to raise a kid, all that fresh air and nature." After these incidents, Amanda would often text me apologetically, "Sorry about Jackson. He does not mean to pressure you." But the pressure was undeniable, a constant drip of suggestions and hints that I tried to attribute to his anxiety about impending fatherhood rather than something more concerning. I should have paid closer attention. I should have recognized the pattern forming. But grief does strange things to your perception, and family dynamics are complicated even in the best of times. I wanted to believe the best about the man my sister had chosen, despite the evidence mounting against him. The first direct confrontation came 3 months after I inherited the cabin. Jackson cornered me at my parents' anniversary celebration. "Look, Rodney, I have been thinking. That cabin sits empty most of the time while you are working in the city. Why not let Amanda and me use it? We could take care of the place, maybe do some upgrades." I explained as politely as I could that I valued the cabin as my personal retreat and was not interested in sharing ownership or giving open access. "But we are family," he pressed, his friendly tone carrying an undercurrent of entitlement. "Do you really need a whole second home to yourself? Seems selfish when your sister is about to have a baby." Before I could respond, he walked away, leaving me feeling vaguely guilty, despite knowing I had every right to establish boundaries around my inheritance. A week later, Amanda called me in tears. Their landlord was selling their apartment building, and they needed to find a new place within 60 days. Jackson's latest business venture had failed, and they were struggling financially. "I am not asking for anything," she said quickly when I expressed sympathy. "I just needed someone to talk to." But the implied request hung in the air, between us unspoken but palpable. The following weekend during a family dinner, Jackson casually announced that they were considering moving up north to give their baby a better quality of life. My parents nodded approvingly while I sat in confused silence, wondering what exactly he meant by up north, the same general region where my cabin was located. After dinner, my father pulled me aside. "You know, son, you could be more generous with your sister. That cabin is just sitting there most of the time." "Dad, I use it regularly," I protested. "And it is not just about usage, it is about respecting Grandpa's wishes. He left it specifically to me." My father sighed. Family should take care of family. Just think about it. I left feeling like I was the unreasonable one, the selfish son hoarding resources while his pregnant sister struggled. It was a masterful manipulation, and I was beginning to see how Jackson had orchestrated it, placing subtle pressure points on everyone around me. Then strange things started happening. The spare key I kept in my apartment in Chicago disappeared after a family visit. I initially assumed I had misplaced it until I noticed unexpected charges on the cabin's utility bills, usage spikes, when I had not been there. A neighbor near the cabin, an elderly man named Frank, who had known my grandfather for decades, called me one evening. "Just wanted to check if those renovation plans you mentioned are still happening this spring," he said casually. "Renovation plans?" I asked, confused. "I have not mentioned any renovations." There was an awkward pause before Frank continued. "Oh, must have misunderstood. Your brother-in-law was up here last weekend talking about some major changes planned for the property. Said you had given him the go-ahead." My stomach tightened. "Frank, I have not authorized any changes, and Jackson is not supposed to be there without my knowledge." "Well, he certainly acted like he owned the place," Frank replied. "Had some contractor with him, walking the property, measuring things." That evening, scrolling through social media, I discovered posts from Amanda about new beginnings at the lake and returning to a simpler life with vague photos of the lake near my cabin as the backdrop. She had never once asked me directly if they could move in. My anxiety building, I decided to drive up to the cabin that weekend, instead of working through the backlog of projects that had piled up at my firm. Something did not feel right, and I needed to see the property for myself. The drive from Chicago to northern Michigan is normally peaceful, a gradual transition from urban congestion to rural serenity. But that Friday afternoon, every mile increased my dread. My phone kept buzzing with work emergencies trying to pull me back to the city clients with urgent revisions deadlines looming. I silenced it after the third call. I tried reaching Amanda multiple times during the drive, but each call went straight to voicemail. Jackson's phone rang, but remained unanswered. The silence only amplified my suspicions. As I turned onto the narrow dirt road leading to the cabin, my grip tightened on the steering wheel. What would I find? Was I overreacting? Perhaps there was an innocent explanation for everything: the missing key, the utility bills, the renovation talk. Those hopes evaporated as I rounded the final bend and saw an unfamiliar moving truck parked in my driveway. Beside it were two cars I did not recognize. The cabin windows glowed with light, and I could see silhouettes moving inside what should have been an empty building. My heart pounded as I parked behind the truck and slowly approached the cabin. The sound of laughter and conversation drifted through the partially open windows. I heard Jackson's distinctive voice giving directions. "That couch should go against the far wall. We will put the TV mount here." I stepped onto the porch, finding the front door unlocked. Taking a deep breath, I pushed it open and stepped inside my own property, unprepared for the scene of invasion that awaited me. The interior of my grandfather's cabin had been transformed into a chaotic staging ground for what was clearly a full-scale move-in. Cardboard boxes were stacked against walls. New furniture pieces stood awkwardly in the center of rooms, and my grandfather's cherished possessions had been pushed aside or piled in corners like discarded relics. Jackson stood in the center of the living room, directing two burly movers who were struggling with a leather sectional sofa I had never seen before. He wore a flannel shirt and jeans, looking for all the world like he belonged there, like this was his domain to reshape as he pleased. "The TV will go on that wall," he was saying, pointing to the space above the fireplace where my grandfather's hand-carved fishing lures had always been displayed. The lures were now gone, replaced by a large mounting bracket. In what had always been my grandfather's bedroom, a young woman with a visibly pregnant belly was painting the walls a pale yellow. Drop cloths covered the hardwood floors my grandfather had installed by hand. The antique dresser that had belonged to my great-grandmother was nowhere to be seen. Two other men, friends of Jackson, I vaguely recognized from previous family gatherings, were installing a new refrigerator in the kitchen, the old one unplugged and pushed to the side. My grandfather's collection of cast-iron cookware that had hung proudly on the wall for decades was now packed in a box labeled Goodwill. For several seconds, no one noticed me standing in the doorway. I was too stunned to speak, trying to process the violation unfolding before my eyes. Then the floorboard creaked beneath my weight, and all activity ceased as every head turned in my direction. Jackson recovered first his surprise, quickly masked by an overly enthusiastic greeting. "Rodney, what are you doing here? This is perfect timing. You can help us decide where to put your grandfather's fishing gear." His tone was casual, as if I had walked in on a surprise party rather than a home invasion. "What am I doing here?" I repeated slowly, struggling to maintain my composure. "This is my cabin. The better question is, what are you doing here, Jackson?" He laughed, the sound hollow and forced. "Come on, do not play dumb. We talked about this." He approached, lowering his voice. "Look, I know we sprung the timeline on you, but with the baby coming, we had to move quickly." The pregnant woman waddled over, paintbrush still in hand. "You must be Rodney. I am Melissa. Jackson has told me so much about you." She smiled warmly, genuinely, making my confusion deepen further. "Melissa." I looked between them pieces, clicking into place with sickening clarity. "Where is Amanda?" Jackson's expression tightened, almost imperceptibly. "Amanda and I are taking some time apart." "Did not she tell you? This is Melissa, my girlfriend. She is due in 2 months." The room seemed to tilt around me. My sister was not part of this scheme. This was not Jackson moving my pregnant sister into the cabin. This was Jackson moving his pregnant girlfriend into my property while still married to my sister. "Your girlfriend," I repeated flatly. "And you are moving her into my cabin because your grandfather promised this place to me," Jackson said firmly, a rehearsed line. "We talked about it many times before he passed. He wanted me to have a fresh start, said I had potential. He knew this would be the perfect place for me to build my new business and raise a family." The absurdity of this claim momentarily rendered me speechless. My grandfather had barely tolerated Jackson at family gatherings, seeing through his charm to the opportunist beneath. "That is a lie," I finally managed. "Grandpa never promised you anything. This cabin was left to me in his will, which you know perfectly well." Melissa's smile faltered. "Jackson said his wife's brother was letting us use the family cabin until we get on our feet. That you were all supportive of our fresh start." "I never agreed to any of this," I said, addressing her directly, seeing the confusion dawn in her eyes. "This is the first I am hearing about any of it." Jackson stepped between us. "Rodney is just being modest." He definitely agreed. "Right, guys." He looked to his friends for backup, who nodded unconvincingly. One of the movers cleared his throat awkwardly. "Should we keep unloading, or—" "Yes," Jackson said firmly. "No," I countered. "Nothing else comes into this cabin." The movers exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Jackson's friendly facade began to crack. "Do not be difficult about this, Rodney. You do not even use this place most of the time. You have your fancy apartment in Chicago. What do you need a second home for?" I noticed. Movement in the corner of the room. One of Jackson's friends was shoving something into a garbage bag. With mounting horror, I recognized my grandfather's prized fishing rod, the one he had used to teach me to fish, the one that had hung above the fireplace for decades. "What are you doing with that?" I demanded, moving quickly to retrieve it. "It is just old junk," Jackson's friend said with a shrug. Jackson said we could clear out all this outdated stuff. Something snapped inside me. All the manipulation, the entitlement, the violation of not just my property, but my grandfather's memory. It crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. I stood straight, my voice steady and cold as the lake in winter. "You do not get to steal my home." Jackson's face darkened. He stepped toward me, using his slight height advantage to try to intimidate me. "Look, you ungrateful little brat. I have been putting up with your family for years. I deserve this place more than you do. What have you ever done besides coast through life on family connections?" Melissa backed away, her hand protectively over her belly. "Jackson, you told me this was all arranged. You said his grandfather wanted us to have the cabin." "Shut up," Jackson snapped at her without taking his eyes off me. The movers set down the furniture they had been holding, one of them muttering, "We do not do family disputes, man. This is not what we signed up for." Nobody is leaving until we get this sorted, Jackson insisted, his voice rising. I have already started renovations. I have plans for this place. Plans, I echoed. What plans? Jackson's friend piped up, oblivious to the tension. The vacation rental conversion. Jackson says, we can make $500 a night in summer easy. I turned back to Jackson, disgusted. So that is your angle. You were going to turn my grandfather's home into a rental property for profit. At least I would be putting it to good use, he shouted. What do? Come up here once a month to mope around and feel sorry for yourself. As we argued, Melissa had wandered into the small office area. Jackson. She called, her voice trembling. What are these? She held up several documents. Even from a distance, I could see what appeared to be my signature on them, except I had never signed anything related to the cabin other than the inheritance paperwork. I crossed the room and took the papers from her hands. They were crude attempts at legal documents, a transfer of ownership, a quitclaim deed, even a power of attorney, all bearing forgeries of my signature. The final piece fell into place. This was not just opportunistic overreach, this was premeditated fraud. You forged my signature, I said, the papers shaking in my hand. You were planning to steal this property outright. Jackson lunged for the documents. Give those back. They are none of your business. None of my business. These have my forged signature on them. I held them out of reach. This is criminal, Jackson. This is fraud. The color drained from his face, quickly replaced by a mottled red. You do not understand what I have been through, he shouted. I lost my job 3 months ago. We were about to be evicted. Melissa's parents kicked her out when they found out about the baby. Where were we supposed to go? Not here, I said firmly. Not into my home using forged documents without even asking me. That was never an option. I pulled out my phone and did what I should have done the moment I walked in. I am calling the police. The sheriff's deputy who responded to my call was a middle-aged woman named Officer Patel, with a no-nonsense demeanor and keen eyes that seemed to assess the situation quickly. She listened patiently as both Jackson and I presented our versions of events, then asked to see the documents. These are amateur forgeries at best, she noted, examining the papers. And, you admit to creating these? She asked Jackson directly. I was desperate, he muttered, his earlier bravado deflated under official scrutiny. I was going to make it right eventually. Officer Patel explained that I had several options, including pressing criminal charges for fraud, forgery, and breaking and entering. The gravity of the situation finally seemed to sink in for Jackson as she detailed potential penalties. Please, he begged, looking between me and the officer. I cannot go to jail. Melissa is due in 2 months. We have nowhere else to go. Melissa sat on a chair in the corner, tears streaming down her face. I had no idea, she kept saying. Jackson told me this was all arranged. I never would have agreed to this otherwise. I felt a wave of pity for her, clearly another victim of Jackson's manipulations. I want everyone out of my property within the hour, I said firmly. The movers can take everything they brought in back out. Anything that belongs to the cabin stays. Officer Patel nodded. That seems reasonable. I will stay to ensure the transition happens peacefully. She turned to Jackson. As for the fraudulent documents, that is a serious offense. The property owner could pursue charges. Are you going to? Jackson asked me, a mixture of defiance and fear in his eyes. I looked at Melissa at her obvious distress and advanced pregnancy, then back at Jackson. I have not decided yet, but consider this your only warning. Come near this property again, and I will not hesitate to press full charges. Under Officer Patel's supervision, the exodus began. The movers, now understanding the situation, worked quickly to remove the furniture they had brought in. Jackson's friends slunk out without meeting my eyes. Melissa apologized repeatedly as she gathered her painting supplies, her vulnerability evident in every movement. When everyone had gone and the moving truck had pulled away, Officer Patel took my statement and provided information about restraining orders. You might want to consider changing the locks, she advised, before leaving, and document everything just in case. As her patrol car disappeared down the driveway, I stood alone in the doorway of the cabin surveying the aftermath of the invasion. Some of my grandfather's things had been moved. Others packed away, a few damaged in the process. The yellow paint in the bedroom would need to be covered. The mounting bracket above the fireplace would have to be removed. But the structure itself, the bones of the place my grandfather had built with his own hands, remained intact. It could be restored. It was still mine. I called my sister Amanda that evening, dreading the conversation. She answered on the first ring, her voice cautious. "Rodney, is everything okay?" "Not really," I admitted. "I need to tell you something, and it is not going to be easy to hear." The silence that followed my explanation was deafening. Then came a choked sob. "I knew he was seeing someone," she whispered. "I found messages on his phone. But I had no idea about the cabin, about trying to take your inheritance." "I am so sorry, Rodney. You have nothing to apologize for," I assured her. "You are as much a victim in this as I am." "I filed for separation last week," she admitted. "I was going to tell everyone at Sunday dinner. This just confirms I made the right decision. My parents were initially skeptical when I called them next, suggesting I might have overreacted to Jackson simply borrowing the cabin. But when I mentioned the pregnant girlfriend and the forged documents, their tone changed dramatically. That conniving little, my father, could not even finish the sentence. "Is Amanda okay? She will be?" I said, hoping it was true. She had already started the separation process. "Why did not she tell us?" my mother asked, hurt, evident in her voice. "I think she was ashamed," I suggested. "It is not easy to admit you have been deceived by someone you loved." The following weeks brought a cascade of revelations and changes. Amanda filed for divorce and temporarily moved in with our parents. An investigation revealed Jackson had taken out credit cards in her name, accumulating debt she knew nothing about. The forgery attempt at the cabin was just one in a pattern of financial manipulations. I filed for a restraining order against Jackson, not just for myself, but for the property. The legal process was straightforward, given the evidence and Officer Patel's report. Jackson made no attempt to contest it, having apparently fled to his brother's place in Wisconsin once the extent of his fraudulent activities became known. Returning to the cabin regularly during this period was difficult. Each time I walked through the door, I remembered the violation, the sight of strangers rearranging my grandfather's possessions as if they had the right. I would find myself checking and rechecking the locks, peering out windows at unexpected sounds. Gradually, I began to reclaim the space. I repainted the bedroom back to its original warm cedar color. I rehung the fishing lures in their rightful place above the fireplace. I found the antique dresser in the shed, fortunately undamaged, and restored it to my grandfather's room. Frank, my neighbor, became an unexpected ally in the healing process. He helped me install a security system and offered to keep an eye on the place when I was back in Chicago. Other neighbors, hearing what had happened, shared similar stories of family property disputes and boundary violations. "Family land brings out the worst in some folks," Frank observed one evening, as we sat on the dock watching the sunset. "Your grandfather knew what he was doing when he left it specifically to you. He trusted your stewardship." Those words helped ease the lingering guilt I felt about denying my sister and her now ex-husband use of the property. I had not been selfish. I had been honoring my grandfather's wishes and protecting his legacy. Amanda and I grew closer through the aftermath. Free from Jackson's influence, she began to rediscover her own strength. When she gave birth to my niece 3 months later, I was in the waiting room. Holding that tiny, innocent baby girl, I made a silent promise that she would know this lake, these trees, this cabin, but through honest means, through shared family experiences rather than entitlement or deception. 6 months after the confrontation, I sat alone on the dock at sunset, just as I had countless times with my grandfather. The western sky blazed orange and pink, the colors reflecting on the still surface of the lake. A loon called in the distance, its haunting cry echoing across the water. In that moment, I could almost feel my grandfather sitting beside me, his weathered hand on my shoulder, his approving nod, acknowledging that I had protected what mattered. I had honored his gift, not by sharing it indiscriminately, but by preserving its integrity and meaning. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is draw a clear line, establish firm boundaries, and protect what is precious to you, not out of selfishness, but out of respect for its true value and the intentions behind it. The cabin was never just about property or privilege, bake end. It was about connection, continuity, and care. Have you ever had to stand firm to protect something that mattered deeply to you? Let me know in the comments below.